Salvete discipuli. Wow, it's been a long time since we've had Latin class. I hope you haven't forgotten everything. I've missed you all. This coronavirus sure has touched everyone's life in every different way. Oh my goodness, school, work, church. Wow. I hope you're doing well in your schoolwork at home, and I'm guessing that you haven't missed Latin class too much. Mr. Michalski decided it would be better to make Latin class more of a voluntary class during this distance learning time period. However, I still think that Latin is a very important part of your education. So I plan to continue uploading notes and worksheets for you to study, and today's lesson is a PowerPoint. I know you like the videos the best. So here we go with common Latin phrases. Don't forget, Mrs. Borsch, magistra, you remember what that means, right? Right, teacher. All right. And of course, I put the most iconic picture here for our first slide. You know this is the Colosseum, right? Yes. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could take a field trip there one of these days? All right. Our first of our common Latin phrases is graduation honors, the terms that are used in graduation services. And I put this picture here because these guys, Ben and Jonathan specifically, I don't know what Danny Dugan is up to, but Jonathan and Ben were set to graduate from Hyles-Anderson College on May 1st. And the coronavirus certainly has messed that up. But anyway, here are the three terms that are used in graduation services: cum laude, magna cum laude, and summa cum laude. And they are based on grade point averages, what you get for your grades on an average from the time that you begin school as a freshman to the time you're done with your last class as a senior. And these are what the terms mean. Cum laude, with praise or honor. Obviously the word cum is with, and laude means praise or honor. And you can read those: magna cum laude, with great praise, and then with highest praise. AM and PM, terms we use all the time. AM and PM. Do you remember what they stand for? Those are Latin terms, Latin abbreviations. Antemeridium is the AM, which means before midday, and postmeridium, which means after midday. Boy, we all got pretty tired of hearing about this. They decided to impede. This is a picture of President Trump on his State of the Union address. And if any of you watched that, I think you got to watch it in school before. Oh, remember that? Long time ago? Quid pro quo is, boy, that statement was floating around like crazy. Do you know what it means? That's a Latin phrase. There's what it means. It is actually literally what for what? Something in exchange for something. And if you followed that at all, you know that they were accusing President Trump of asking the president of Ukraine to dig up some damaging information about Biden and his son. And he was going to, without that information, they were going to withhold some $400 million of military aid to them because of the Ukraine and their constant conflict, their ongoing conflict with Russia. So anyway, that's quid pro quo. Our next common phrase, caveat emptor. Have you ever heard that one? I'm sure your parents have. Caveat emptor, which means let the buyer beware. Simply put, you have to be responsible for knowing and all about the item or whatever you're buying. The principle that the buyer alone is responsible for checking the quality of suitable goods. And what could be more appropriate than a garage sale? You see something at a garage sale, oh, it looks great, you get it home and it doesn't work. Let the buyer beware. And of course, caveat emptor, this is very much so applies to buying a house. Certainly you want to know everything about the condition and the building and all of the essential parts of a house when you're buying, etc. We all use that all the time, don't we? Etc. That's exactly how to spell it. It's actually two words, et meaning and cetera, and the rest. And I put a picture of a famous Roman landmark here on this page. Do any of you know the name of this famous fountain? There's a legend that goes along with it. Throw a penny in the fountain and it means your wish will come true. You'll get to return to Rome someday. It's called the Trevi Fountain. You ought to look that up. There's a lot of interesting history about that. Bonafide. Another very common Latin phrase that is used in English. Bonafide means genuine or real. Was he wearing bonafide sharkskin boots? Oh my goodness. Cowboy boots have certainly never been on my list of high fashion. All right. Do you know what Italian city this is? Here's another picture of a famous Italian city. If you guessed Venice, you are correct. The city of canals. All right. Our next two are abbreviations, IE and EG. Somewhat similar. IE is id est, that is, and exemple gratia. For example, and I've given you two examples there at the bottom of the screen. The old man had terrible halitosis, i.e., bad breath. You can find many types of trees in our state, e.g., exemple gratia, for the example, the maple, oak, elm, birch, etc. Look at that. I used two Latin abbreviations in the same sentence. Hope you're getting outside to enjoy the coming of spring. Old Man Winter reared his head this week with our snow, but we still have lots of spring flowers blooming and buds coming on the trees. All right. You know this famous building here in this picture, don't you? Right. The Leaning Tower of Pisa. All right, two more terms. These terms are used in the legal profession. If you decide to go to school to become a lawyer, you're going to know a lot of Latin terms. I know I've reminded you about this before, but there are many professions around today that require a lot of Latin knowledge, and one of them is the legal profession. They use these terms every day, just like their English. I know the medical field is also very much steeped in Latin terms and terminology. Ad hoc at the top there for this, or for this case only, is what that refers to, ad hoc. And then ad nauseum, to the point of being sick. You could probably guess nauseum, nauseated. Obviously, that's the Latin root word for that word, for our word nauseate. And yes, I was talking about the impeachment, and we were beginning to hear so much talk about that. It was to the point of ad nauseum, totally to the point of being sick. All right, the next term was on the wall in my Latin room in the grade school. Do you remember what it was? It's a very famous statement. Carpe diem. Do you remember what it means? I would think so. Hopefully you do. Seize the day. And of course, obviously this term, carpe diem, it's used to encourage someone to make the most out of the present rather than dwelling on the future. Carpe diem. That certainly applies today. Make the most out of the situation we have here. Study, get your work done, keep learning, keep growing. Don't just try to get by with the least amount of work possible, but keep applying yourself and learning all that you can here from home. Weni witty wiki. Another famous statement. This statement was quoted by Julius Caesar, one of the most famous Roman rulers for sure. He was assassinated by members of the Roman Senate. In the Senate, yes. They led a plot to kill him, and they all had their, I just thought of this, they all had their daggers there to kill Julius Caesar. Obviously, there were no metal detectors in their Senate offices. So yes, he was stabbed multiple times, and in the very famous play by William Shakespeare, the famous play by the name Julius Caesar, there is a Latin phrase that they attribute to Julius Caesar at the time of his death. And he's lying there on the floor getting stabbed by all of these people that he knows very well. And then he says, "Et tu, Brute?" Meaning, and you too? You too, Brutus? Brutus was one of his friends and closest advisors. And so that's just, we did a little paper on Julius Caesar, so hopefully you remember some of that. Here's another famous statement that Mr. Dowdy, I'm sure, has talked to you about in U.S. history. Sic semper tyrannis. Thus always to tyrants, spoken by John Wilkes Booth. He was an actor, so he was very much accustomed to being at Ford's Theater, knew all of the secret passages and all of the backstage places, and so no one, of course, suspected him when they saw him at the theater. And unfortunately for our president and our nation, the guard, his Secret Service detail, was not in the box at the time. He snuck into the box, shot the president in the back of the head, jumped off of the balcony onto the stage, broke his leg, and stood up to yell, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants. Of course, Abraham Lincoln was far from a tyrant, arguably one of the most great presidents of all time. All right, next. Speaking of semper is always, semper fidelis, the Marine Corps motto. Do you know what it means? Yes. If you are a Marine, it would have been drilled into you. They shorten it to Semper Fi. Always faithful, always loyal. And those Marine guys standing there at attention, looking pretty sharp. A pluribus unum. Of course, I've mentioned this also to you before, but at the founding of our nation, at that time period in the early 1800s, Latin was a very common language still. Students were learning it in grade school, high school. I mean, it was part of their education. John Quincy Adams was fluent in Latin. In fact, 11 out of our first 21 presidents knew Latin fluently. They knew several languages fluently, in fact. And it's noted that John Adams encouraged his son, John Quincy Adams, to read, I forget what it was, some book in the Latin, because there was much more to gain and understand reading it in the Latin version. So anyway, e pluribus unum used to be the motto of the United States. Out of many, one is what that means. Out of many, one. Out of many states, one union, one nation under God. It also appears on our coins and our paper bills. In 1956, our official motto was changed to "In God We Trust." And certainly I hope we are trusting God and His direction, certainly in this time of our country and all of the unrest and worries about the future. God certainly knows what's happening. annuit coeptis, and novos oror seclorum. Two phrases on the back side of our dollar bills. If you look at a dollar bill, you can see it on the back side on the Great Seal of the United States. And the meanings of these two are right here on the screen in that order. He, the annuit, is the Latin verb for favors our undertakings, or in other words, God approves of the founding of our government, the one nation under God, justice for all. And the new order of the ages was a beginning. It was the beginning of a new American era. 1776, July 4, we declared our independence. And when in the early days of the founding of our country, we were setting up our currency, there were some smart men, knew Latin well, and they decided on all of these statements for the Great Seal. Per capita, another common phrase that just means by or for each person. There's an example of it used in a sentence. Florida has the highest population per capita, highest prison population per capita in the nation. Now, I did not look this up to make sure that this was correct, but this was a statement I found. Per capita. P.S. Good old Goofy. Have you been watching a lot of cartoons lately? Playing a lot of video game? Hopefully not too much. Write a letter every now and then. Write a letter to someone in your family or someone that you don't see very often, whether they live here. Maybe just send them a note in the mail. What an encouragement that would be. P.S. Do you know what P.S. stands for? It's Latin, obviously. Postscriptum, after what was written. A.D., not after death. The dates on a timeline, A.D. and B.C. B.C. and A.D. B.C., before Christ, and A.D., Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, Anno Domini. Now, in modern textbooks, history textbooks, and they have replaced those two terms, the BC and the AD, because they obviously think that we need to take Christ out of everything. They took him out of the school, separation of church and state, but they took Christ out of it and they changed it to CE, as in the Common Era. That's what that stands for if you ever see that in a textbook. And then the BCE, before the Common Era. So that they replaced the BC, before Christ, with before the Common Era. And our last one, ending up with a picture, caricature of Abraham Lincoln, adlib. Adlib. Have you ever ad-libbed before? You're getting ready with your science and history fair projects and Bible fair, I think, for the 6th graders. And when you get ready for your speech, are you going to ad-lib or are you going to prepare something beforehand? Ad-lib simply means, it's Latin for pleasure, to speak or perform without preparation. All right, that's it for today. And I will see you soon with another video, and we will begin doing some work and some learning from chapter 14 in our book. But for now, volate discipuli.